Hello, everyone. Alyssa here from Lost Empire Herbs, and welcome to our first ever live webinar. Today's focus will be on sexual health. And before I hand this over to Logan, I wanted to share a few things with you. We will be opening it up for a Q&A session at the end of this webinar. Please ask your questions in the live chat area of this YouTube page. And to make the live chat function work for you, please log into your YouTube user account. I will monitor and compile all these questions and see how many we can get answered at the end of this session. And that about sums it up. So it's time to get started. Good afternoon, Logan.
Thank you, Alyssa. And welcome everyone to our sexual health webinar. This is our first webinar, as Alyssa said. Hopefully it will be the first of many. Hopefully it goes smoothly and you enjoy it. And on that note, we would love to get your feedback. You can, of course, comment as we're going along, but then after the webinar, email our support, talk to people, let us know, and this will be the first of many. So let's just dive right in. We got a lot to cover today. Why focus on sexual health? It's really important. Sexual health is about more than just the ability to procreate. Of course, that is the first most foundational thing to provide offspring. This is how nature works, not just with the human species, but all throughout nature. Of course, there are different types of sexual function, but as humans, we have our own type, and it starts with that. It's the ability to procreate. And because of that, sexual health is a leading indicator of health. What I mean by that is that if you do not have that ability to procreate, if it is hampered, if it is deficient, then you are not as healthy as you can be. So even if you are a 60-year-old, if you still possess ability, I'm guessing most 60-year-olds probably do not want to have more children, but if you still possess the ability to have children, that means your health is strong. You're not only able to provide that health for yourself, but to pass it on to another generation. And that means that nature is not done with you yet. You still have that enough vitality there to keep going. Women's a little bit different with menopause, but even there we see the same sort of thing. Women can extend the period in which they are able to give birth. But sexual health is not just about procreation, of course. It is also that ability to create. That sexual energy is not just used in sex, it's used elsewhere, and we'll be going more into that. One other part on this, it is important. You don't want to just focus on sex when it becomes a problem. I'm guessing some people on the webinar here, this is why they're watching this right now. They do have some issues and they want to resolve them. But ideally, every human being, because we are sexual beings, should be looking at sexual health throughout the span of our lifetime, or I guess the span of puberty at least. You don't really need to focus on it earlier than that. And that's, once again, because that sexual energy is used for more than just sex, and it's so important for our health. So if we can aim toward an ideal of sexual health, this idea of radiant health, health beyond danger, applies to the sexual arena as well. So disclaimer, of course, the information on this webinar is not intended or implied to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of a physician or other qualified health provider. All I'm doing here is providing information that you can then take for yourself. You can choose to experiment. You can talk to your doctor or other healthcare provider and see what is going on to help you with your solutions or what you're looking to go for. So this webinar is focused on men, just because, that's most of our customer base. I'm a man. I know this subject best of all, but just because it's focused on men doesn't mean that most of the concepts won't apply to women too. I'd say at least 80–90%. We'll be talking about the penis a lot, but really a lot of it applies. What a lot of people don't realize is that women have more erectile tissue than men do. It's just not as apparent. So women actually have erectile dysfunction too, or other issues just like that. The thing is, their vagina is getting swollen with that, the same tissue, the blood supply is going in there, but they can still have sex if it's not getting erect, unlike a guy is able to do that. Now, they may not enjoy sex, and that's definitely a thing there, but the same functions are much at play there. There are some key differences, different levels of hormones, different psychological profiles to some degree. So there are differences in this, but most of it does apply to women. That being said, we are absolutely focusing on men throughout this webinar. So for those of you that do not know me, my name is Logan Christopher. I'm a strongman, well known for juggling kettlebells, lifting 1,000 pounds, pulling a fire truck by my hair, ripping decks of cards in half, all kinds of different things. And I bring that up because the athletic part is important. It's because of training for strength like this that I first got into health. And once I got into health, that led to herbalism. So, and really the sexual function is very much like athletic function. We'll be talking a little bit about that. I'm also the CEO of Lost Empire Herbs, co-founded it along with my two brothers, Zane and Cloud. I'm an author, husband, and a new father, relatively new. My daughter just celebrated her first birthday, so I did procreate recently. That was great. And I've really made a study of all things health and masculinity, something I'll be talking about much more in the future. This is the first time saying this, but I've actually had my own challenges in this realm. I'll be diving into some of the causes of that as well as what has worked well for me. Yin and yang. Everyone has seen this symbol before, but it's really important. And the more I kind of reflect and think on this, the more important I find it to be, because it really encompasses so much. Yin and yang is the duality. Of course, there's the masculine yang and the feminine yin, but really masculine and feminine are just one fraction or facet of this picture. I like the terms yin and yang. Something that works a little bit more to capture the big picture is chaos being yin and order being yang. But even then, I kind of see those as facets. All these different ways you can apply this duality of nature and how there are reflections or opposites to each other. So this is important when we're talking about sex. The yang is that driving force. It is important for sex, especially for the masculine. It's also at play in athletics. The ability to lift a heavy weight is very yang in nature. It also applies in business, financial success. It's the same sort of energy behind that. And if you're thinking about sexual function, a mistake, especially guys make, is that it's all about the yang herbs. It's all about the ones that, give a more erectile power and more powerful orgasms. And absolutely we'll be talking about that. But you don't want to neglect the yin. The yin is restoration, and it's equally important. You can't have a strong foundation. Like the yin is the foundation from which to have that yang driving force. So the yang manifests itself as a strong erection. The yin may be seen more in like reproductive ability, the sperm quality and quantity. You can think of the testicles, right? This is more internal to the body, even though they hang out to some degree. Whereas with a woman, everything is much more inside. So it is more yin in nature. But even among the guys, everything, there's a reflection, and it's kind of a fractal pattern going down. So the sperm are manufactured within the body. And if you think of your body as a alchemical apparatus, the sperm is this essence, this life-giving essence that is created from the body, and so much goes into doing that. So it's really important to have that yin foundation so you're able to create this material, whether you're using it for procreation or not. And then, of course, if that's working well, then the yang side of things tends to work very well. So one of the things that got me really interested in the topic of sex, kind of for other purposes beyond sex, was Napoleon Hill, author of the classic Think and Grow Rich. I'm not sure if this quote was from that book or he wrote a whole bunch of other books and touched on the same topic, but he talks about the power of sex transmutation. And he said, when driven by this desire, men develop keenness of imagination, courage, willpower, persistence, and creative ability unknown to them at other times. Napoleon Hill talks about sex as an emotion, an energy that can be used and harnessed and transmuted into other things. So I feel this sexual health, this sexual energy is not just useful for sex itself. Absolutely, you can apply it there, but you can apply it in other reasons, which speaks to why this area is so much more important than just for sex itself. Another quote that I like comes from Oliver Wendell Holmes, a little bit of a different topic, but important for this. He says, "For the simplicity that lies this side of complexity, I would not give a fig. But for the simplicity that lies on the other side of complexity, I would give my life." And what this means is best seen in this illustration here. There is a simplistic view of things, and I can liken this to various erectile dysfunction drugs, right? Oh, it's not working? Here, pop this pill, things will work out for you. It's a very simplistic way of looking at the world. And to some degree, it absolutely does work. But there are problems with that, which we will be talking about. Then you get to this big ball of complexity. And if you want to understand everything that goes into sexual health, it is very complex. We'll be talking about some of the chemicals that cause erections, for instance, nitric oxide and cyclic GMP and PDE5. It gets very complex if you're getting down to this molecular level. And there's so much other things in there. There's hormones and whatnot. It's a complex subject. Now, if you can get to the other side, the elegant simplicity, as it's listed here, that is where really you've distilled it down to its essence, its foundation, and it becomes easy once again. Unfortunately, this webinar, what we're covering here, we're diving into the complexity of this issue. I have not been in this field long enough to really get to an elegant simplicity, I think. So we are talking about lots of things, throwing lots at you. You might end up leaving this webinar a bit more confused than when you got in, but if I can focus you in on just a couple things that may be key, and then it's up to you to experiment and play with them, find what works for you, then that is what's really important. So fair warning, we are still in the complexity phase. Talking about erections, I feel like many people think of them as an all or nothing thing, but it's not a very helpful way to look at it. Instead, it's more of a spectrum, or there's degrees of it, right? You can have a half erect penis, you can have it fully erect, and there's different stages kind of going on. So it's important with everything that we're looking at, don't see things as black and white or true or false. There can be degrees of this. I like to think of things in terms of a spectrum. In some areas, we may not have all these 4 different areas, but in some we will. So there's deficient and excessive on the other sides. With an erection, you can think deficient to the far side would be not being able to get an erection at all. Excessive would be a nonstop erection that you can't get rid of. So you might make a joke like, I'd love to have that, but really that would definitely get in the way. So there's this zone in the middle, somewhere between normal and ideal. Now, with ideal, we do need to be careful as far as not having an ideal that we can never reach, but really, optimally, we like to be better than normal, especially if you're looking at normal in this day and age, which is actually subpar compared to years past. So everything that we're talking about exists on a spectrum like this. Something that can be helpful is to rate things on a scale of 0 to 10. That takes a subjective matter like, oh, how strong is this erection? And it's still a little subjective because you're just deciding a number, but then it nails it down just a little bit more, so that can be very helpful. So over time, where you can't remember a vague degree of hardness, for instance, but with a number, you can judge against that a little bit better. So the first subject area we're diving into is 6 things to look for in your cock. We're narrowing in on this, then we're going to go a bit broader. But first, weird cures from history. I wanted to liven the mood up here. I found this report that was just talking about some of the treatments that have been done over the years to work on impotence and erectile dysfunction. The first one up, we have from ancient Egypt. One remedy was baby crocodile hearts were mixed with wood oil to the appropriate consistency, and this was then smeared onto the penis to restore potency. Now, we're going to be talking about some unusual herbs, but nothing is going to be like baby crocodile hearts. I wouldn't recommend that. Who's to say? It possibly could work, but I'm guessing it's probably not the best option, nor an easy one to get. Maybe if you're in Florida, it would be, but once again, not recommending that. So the 6 things to look for in your cock. Number 1 is hardness. Once again, you can have like complete flaccidity or complete firmness, and really there are degrees in between. So you don't want to think of it as an all or nothing thing, but just how hard does it get? Another thing you can look at is an angle of erection, right? So it's not as simple as like 0 degrees to 180 degrees, but in general, the harder an erection gets, the more of an angle it's going to take. But this is individual. Some people, for whatever reason, have a more of an upright dick versus going to the left, right. So you do want to judge this against yourself, but it can be another factor to look at. Third, we have duration, and specifically I'm talking about duration of the erection here, not duration of how long you can last in sex. So there could be a 0-second duration, excuse me. So if you can't get it up at all, that would be no duration at all. A problem that a lot of guys have, we've seen this with customers, actually this is something I've had myself, like no problem getting hard in the first place, but then it goes away before you want it to go away. So that is one area of duration. And for other people, you may be able to get it and it goes away, then it comes back, you're able to get it there. For other people, it may stay away. Other people, once you have an erection, like it's going to stay there until you're finished, right? So how long can you maintain a hard erection? What is the staying power in doing that? Very important factor we want to look at. And you can look at this a couple different ways, right? So if you're in sexual activity, hopefully, staying hard throughout that time. But if you get aroused and then no friction, don't touch it or anything, how long does it just stay of its own accord? You can look at this across a couple different factors. Next up, we have frequency. How often are you having erections? Of course, during sexual activity, hopefully they're happening there, but we can also look at morning wood, right? This is the body's reset or testing mechanism. Like that testing button on a smoke alarm, you're supposed to press it once a week to make sure it's working. Morning wood is kind of like that. Your body is just running the program through to make sure everything is working good. If you don't have it then chances are problems some other times. You can look at how often is this starting this process even without full-on sexual activity? Like if your wife or girlfriend or whoever gives you a certain look, can that start the process going? Or even as far, this is a bit of the excessive realm, but like a high school kid when a stiff breeze goes by and you have to hide yourself with a textbook. Different degrees of frequency that we can look at. Number 5 is radiating heat. This is an interesting one. I can't find the source of where I first heard this, but it was stages according to some old Chinese herbalist doctor person. He was talking about these different stages, like you have hardness and you have these different things, but the last and ultimate stage, you wanted it not only to be hard, but to be radiating heat. That is, you could feel its warmth without touching it, so outside of it. And what's really going on here, right? Blood flow is coming into the area, and if that blood flow is churning over and the blood itself is hot, then it's going to radiate heat from there. So this is kind of that last stage of where you want to go, what you can look for. I'm not suggesting taking a thermometer or anything like that, but you can certainly look for this factor and notice it. Now, one negative factor we want to look at is pain. Obviously, you do not want any, unless you are masochistic, but we're not going to go there for this webinar. For most people, if that's not your intention, then if there is any pain in this area, then absolutely you would want to see someone about that, see a specialist, because that is not a fun area to have pain in. Now we're going to go step away from the cock and move into 8 things to look for in your libido and sexual performance. But first, another weird cure from history. Ooh, this seems brutal. This is, medicine about 100 years ago, maybe a little bit longer than that. This is a quote. For more difficult cases, physicians resorted to scarification of the perineum. That's the taint area. Why scarring this? I don't know. Followed by suction cups that drew out several ounces of bloodletting, a very popular doctor treatment, and the passage of a bougie, that's a thin, flexible surgical instrument, smeared with mercurial ointment upon the mucous membrane of the urethra. I don't know about you, but no amount of ED would want me having mercury inserted up in that way. So do not do that treatment. Okay, back to our 8th thing. So libido. And what is libido? This is kind of one of those nebulous words that most people don't really know what it means. The way I'm talking about it here, this is kind of your baseline of sexual energy, or another way you could think of it is your horniness level. Like, how much do you want to have sex in general? This can be low, it can be high. Of course, excessive, deficient, all those things apply here. Now, number 2, we have arousal. How is that different? I think of libido as more of the baseline, whereas arousal is in that moment. So you may be horny, but do you arouse quickly, or does it take a long time for you to really get aroused in that moment? So just kind of different time frames of what we're looking at as far as that horniness, arousal, libido. These words could be used synonymously, but that's how I'm talking about them a little bit differently here. Then when you are engaged in sexual activity, what is your stamina? So we talked about the duration with the erection, but the stamina is more about how long does it take for you to orgasm. So this can be very short. This can be a long time. How long do you last? And extremes of this, we have on one side premature ejaculation, where nothing but a touch sets you off. On the other side, anorgasmia, where it doesn't matter how long you go, like nothing is going to happen. So different types of problems there. And just for fun, pulled up this chart as I was looking through this. The average man lasts about 6 minutes with a mean range of around 4 to 11 minutes. So I'd say in relation to stamina, ideally you want to be able to last as long as you want, and there are practices of doing that. There are also practices of separating ejaculation from orgasm. That's a bit beyond what we're going to cover in this webinar. But ideally, yeah, you'd be able to go a long time and really orgasm when you choose to. Next up, we have leaking energy. One way of thinking about this, if you're familiar with the Chinese 3 treasures, is the loss of Jing. So that sperm, the ejaculation, a lot of the body's resources go into creating that because it's very important material. And even if we're not talking about energy or anything like that, like there's tons of zinc, the mineral is in there, tons of other things. So there's a lot of the body's resources are going towards that. If you are excessively having sex or excessively masturbating, then you are leaking this energy in this potent form that is the ejaculate. And this can happen in other ways too, right? Nocturnal emissions or wet dreams. Those can be fun to have, but if those are happening on a regular basis, especially, then there can be some issues here. So one of the things we can look at in relation to sperm is just quantity. Now, I'm not saying break out a measuring cup and see where you're at, or tablespoons or anything like that, but certainly you can notice over time if there's more there versus less. You can't assess sperm quality yourself. You're going to have to go to a lab to do that. But quantity, some degree, at least with the ejaculation, the semen, not necessarily the sperm quantity, that is something you can look at. And ideally, you know, some people say that men should learn how to separate ejaculation and never do that. I don't think that's necessarily a healthy practice, but there's definitely a range of too much, and there's probably a range of too little as far as that is concerned. Number 5, we have the refractory period. If you're not familiar with that term, that is after you have orgasmed and ejaculated. Normally those two are synonymous, so they don't have to be. Then your erection goes away generally. There are times when that may not happen, but you also lose interest, kind of a state change out of sexual arousal, and there's a period of time where you are not aroused, not able to get erect. That is the refractory period. So we can look at this, is that a short or a long time frame? Some guys, sex once a week or once a day or every other day, that may be enough and they're not really interested outside of that. Other people want to go back to back to back, right? So are you able to do this? And really looking at it, having sex back to back to back or masturbating back to back to back, although of course there is that whole leaking energy thing, but are you able to do that and notice if over time, like, are things staying rock hard, solid? Is your duration good? All that, is that working straight through from these sessions and you can go nonstop essentially, or are you losing power as you go along? I think this is a really good sign from your body as to whether you may be doing too much or too little. So your frequency of sexual function, and also this is related to libido, right? Because lots of guys are horny until after they have ejaculated, right? Then it's a really different mood that sets in at that point. So how long does it take to get back to that sort of pre-horny state that was involved? Number 6, we have sensation. This, I guess, could have gone into the cock category, but how good does it feel, not just in the orgasm, but throughout the sex? Obviously, you do want to have a good feeling, strong sensation throughout, and there may be times when you're not feeling much in there. So weak versus strong, we can look at it that way. It's similar, but a little bit different orgasmic power. So sensation during the sex, but then sensation during the orgasm. This is one thing I tend to notice a lot with the herbs, taking different ones, is that orgasms tend to be more powerful. That's a thing. Everyone's going to be a little bit different. So that's one thing that I notice a lot with like Thor's hammer, for instance. So you can have, all orgasms are good, but some are definitely weaker and some are stronger. And I suppose there could be an excessive one, but I have not had that as of yet. And to keep this, a lot of stuff is that we're talking about is how, I guess you could say, surface level or whatnot, but really we can look at also the connection you have. If you are having sex with a partner, someone that you love and care about, that feeling of connection can also be strengthened or look at. Do you feel like sex is just a mechanical thing, or is it really driving these other emotions that can be very powerful, other hormones that could be involved, such as oxytocin and whatnot? So that connection and love can be a very powerful aspect of sex. So we definitely want to bring that in there as well. Okay. I know we're going through a lot, but this is being recorded, so you can absolutely watch it again later. We're now going to shift from, in those two categories, we really looked at what was the different areas we can look at as far as sexual function is concerned, whether things are working or not. Where are those problem areas that we have? Feel free to go through all those categories, rate yourself on average like a 0 to 10. How are things working out there? And then you'll know like what are some of the key things. Then when we get to the herbs that can help in those areas and some of the other stuff that we'll be talking about here, then you'll know where you may want to target your efforts as far as helping those areas to improve. So now we're going into the problem areas, and then we'll get into some of the causes behind those. This is the things we want to look at in relation to sexual function. But first, another weird cure from history. This one's just kind of gross, so I apologize if you're grossed out at this, but I thought it was worth sharing. So this cure was the semen of virile young men should be mixed with the excrement of hawks or eagles and taken in pellet form. So I can understand how you get the concept of you should take semen from other guys in order to help your potency, right? That kind of makes logical sense in a way, but I cannot understand how they got hawk shit involved in this. I just do not get it. I suppose looking at that picture, it looks a little bit like that. I don't know. Yeah, just really weird. So I, once again, do not recommend this one. At least it was taken in pellet form. That would make it more palatable, I guess. Okay, moving on. So the first possible problem area is hormones. Of course, testosterone is the hormone that people tend to focus on, but that's just one of so many. There's DHT, estrogen, progesterone, cortisol, luteinizing hormone, prolactin, and on and on. There are so many different hormones. It's best to think of the hormones as a symphony. I like that metaphor because the hormones are chemical messengers and they talk to one another. So even though all the focus is on testosterone, really there are these other hormones that are play in sexual function in different ways. We're not going to go super deep into the hormones, but definitely some of the herbs we work with definitely help in these areas, and that can be an area of problems. So number 2 is dopamine. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter, and dopamine does many things. It's involved in our goal-seeking behavior. It actually is tied into testosterone and some of the other hormones, but it is the neurotransmitter that triggers arousal in the first place. That's why I include it here, right? So let's say you see a naked woman and you get aroused, right? So dopamine is involved in that pathway, or any other way you might get aroused. That is important to recognize. And I bring this up because one of the main problems, kind of a new method of erectile dysfunction, porn-induced erectile dysfunction, that really plays hell with this dopamine pathway. We're going to come back to that and cover that more in later detail. Number 3 is blood flow. So this is where you have the nitric oxide, the cyclic GMP, the PDE5 inhibition, that enzyme in there. So blood is what is essentially happening with the penis or the erectile tissue is the vessels are relaxing with some of these chemicals involved. Blood flows into the area, and then hopefully blood stays in that area, and that is how you have an erect penis or otherwise have erectile tissue. So that's very important that the blood is able to flow in this area, and those chemicals are involved. Another piece of it is the blood vessels themselves, number 4 here. So these blood vessels can be damaged and they're not supporting that blood flow. A similar sort of blood vessel damage you could see is in varicose veins, right? So that same sort of thing could be going on where essentially the blood vessels are damaged or leaking. They're not able to support that blood flow. You can have the damaged capillaries too. One of the biggest culprits in this is high blood sugar. So we see this in diabetics, but also, it happens before people are officially diagnosed with diabetes. If you have metabolic syndrome, this high blood sugar is going to be causing oxidation, inflammation in those tissues over time. And this can be like 20 years of having a diet that is high in sugar, from eating too many carbohydrates and various other factors that are at play there, that these blood vessels begin to get damaged. Another way they can get damaged is through chronically high blood pressure. If that's jacked up too high, just think of it like a sewer system where there's too much pressure running through there. That's going to damage the vessels, pop sewer lids off and whatnot. So you don't want to have too high of these two things, two of the big things that a lot of people are suffering from, so that can damage those vessels in the first place. Another area that can get damaged is the nerves. Our nervous system runs across throughout the body. It's not just a signal from the brain. Of course, we have different areas leading to different things, but the nervous pathway is what is essentially kicking off that whole process of an erection happening. So we want to look at that, and the same sort of thing. The oxidative damage and inflammation can lead to damage of the nervous tissue that is involved in this. Number 6, we have stress. Now, stress can act as a kink in the hose, and really we want to have sex. Sex is an activity to be done in mostly a relaxed atmosphere. If you're in a fight or flight mode, then the blood is not going to that area. Think about acute stressor, right? We have a tiger jump out running and wanting to eat us. Are you thinking about fucking at that time? Probably not, hopefully not, I would say. Instead, blood is going to the periphery, it's going to the limbs, adrenaline is pumping so you can run away or fight. You're not interested in sex. Now, most of us do not have that kind of problem. Instead, most of our stress is chronic these days, right? We have financial stress, just paying the bills, or someone in our family yelling at us, or a boss yelling at us, or too much traffic, or EMFs. We have stress coming in from all of these different factors, both physical and psychological. And when you have that stress, the adrenaline's pumping in your body, then your body is not in that parasympathetic mode, where it can rest and fully be able to be present in the moment in order to have sex. So that's very important. Related to this is psychological issues. So stress can be physiological and psychological. Often both are at play, but in the psychological, kind of talking about this as the mental and emotional issues that are related to sexual function. Performance anxiety, being trapped in your head and not the right head for this case. There's things such as shame and guilt, and this can be, our own self-judgment coming up for whatever reason, or it can also be coming from other people. And one of the key things to recognize is that when it comes to erectile dysfunction, for anyone that suffer that even just like a single time, right? Say it happens from drinking too much alcohol or whatnot, but then you are thinking about that the next time, and you get into a loop of performance anxiety of, I hope it doesn't happen again. And if that is the case, if you're thinking that, if you're kind of playing this on loop, then ultimately it is very much likely to happen again. So these different issues aren't all separated into these categories. Oftentimes they are layered one another on top of themselves. So when there is blood vessel damage, there often is maybe some hormonal disruption with that, and then you can have performance anxiety on top of it. So there's all these different things. Once again, with these 7 areas, list where you may think you may have any issues or any areas that you want to optimize more, and then you can begin focusing on that. Okay, what we've been doing is kind of starting with the easy to see things and kind of walking back towards those root causes. Remember in the beginning when I talked about that, simply just popping an ED pill, while it can work, it is treating a symptom. It does not do anything for the root cause. In fact, it could possibly be making the root cause of the issues worse. So now we're going to dive into 10 areas of causality. But first, weird causes and cures from history. This one was just interesting. Witchcraft. So I was going through this history, and one of the things that was in there was, I have the quote from this book, the Malleus Maleficarum, and probably butchering that pronunciation, the Hammer of the Witches. This book essentially came around early in the whole, and kicked off the whole witch hunt thing. And it says in there, try to persuade the witch to restore it. So the witchcraft was a cause of ED, just basically being cursed, right? But so try to persuade the witch to restore it. If persuasion does not work, use violence. And this, so basically what happened is a person would have some ED, they'd think a witch was causing it, and they would go and try to get the witch to do it, and if not, they would beat her up and then get sexually aroused in the process of doing it. So I don't doubt that that happened, but whether the witches were the cause, that the book actually says that witches were able to make men impotent and indeed cause the disappearance of the penis altogether. So that's very interesting. So I'm hoping none of you are cursed by witchcraft. Instead, we'll go into 10 causes that I think are a bit more prevalent. First is just all the basic stuff. Hydration. Are you drinking enough water? I mean, most people are chronically dehydrated, and it's not just about enough water, but also the right quality of water. Sleep. Most people aren't sleeping enough. And if you're not sleeping, your body's not restoring things. It's not going to be able to repair damage. It's not going to have the hormonal supply. Then you're not going to be in a good place. And once again, it's the quality and the quantity. Exercise. You can definitely exercise too much or too little. Too much exercise will just kind of sap up all that sexual energy in the use of the athletics. So you do want to be aware of that. There's all these lifestyle habits that are at play. If you really want a lot of information on this, my new book, Powered by Nature, that's at poweredbynaturebbook.com, special offer for you there. So much information that just covers all this foundation, what you really need to do to live a natural, healthy lifestyle that is going to give you so much of this basic foundation that's needed for sexual health, because sexual health is about basic health in the beginning. And of course, nutrition. This can get very specific. I mentioned the zinc before involved in the sperm and the semen. Very crucial. If you don't have enough of that zinc, also very important for testosterone production, then you're not going to have this hormone, so you're not going to have that sperm quality. Another mineral would be magnesium. Super essential for relaxation, as well as like 300 other facets of what the body does. So if you don't have enough of that mineral, those blood vessels may not be able to relax and function right. My idea is that you could likely map every vitamin, mineral, amino acid, and fatty acid into sexual function in a direct way. And if not a direct way, an indirect way, absolutely. So you definitely want to cover all those bases. That can be done with a multivitamin mineral supplement. However, you do need to find a good quality one, because there can be problems with excesses of these as well. For instance, many of them have too much copper, iron, which can be problematic, just as too little of these things can be as well. So really getting that nutrition dialed in, that's going to be super important. We mentioned the high blood sugar, right? So if you're eating a bunch of carbohydrates, and especially things with high fructose corn syrup, all kinds of chemicals that are messing up your cell signaling, then it's no wonder that this issue can become an issue in the first place. We also have drugs and their side effects. Do want to mention this because this is why a lot of people have issues here. SSRIs and other antidepressants, ED is a side effect of those. Blood pressure drugs, of course, you know, people have chronically high blood pressure. if that's dangerous, you do want to bring that down. And a lot of lifestyle and dietary changes can do that, but you take those drugs and then you may not have blood pressure in that proper place. Finasteride, that is used for in prostate issues or male pattern baldness. The problem is it gets rid of DHT, which is super important for erectile function. And I know a lot of guys have had lots of issues just based off that one drug. Beta blockers, androgen blockers, chemotherapy, opiates, alcohol, of course. Whiskey dick is I don't know if that's common, but certainly a term that I've heard. So these drugs, realize that a lot of them do affect this area. I'm not a doctor. I'm not saying that you should stop taking drugs, but I would advise, if you are having these issues and if you think some of the pharmaceuticals you're on or other drugs, I guess recreational drugs can fit in here too, then talk to your doctor, see what you can do, if you can work on lifestyle habits as far as being able to reduce off these. Very few drugs need to be on do you need to be on for your lifetime, even though most of them are sold that way. So instead, and if your doctor will not work with you on that, then I would suggest getting a new doctor. But some drugs are going to have these side effects, so you do need to be aware of that. I don't feel most people are properly educated on the side effects that the drugs can possibly give them. Doctor may give them a pamphlet but not go over that. So that is something to look. If you're taking a bunch of stuff and you aren't aware of the side effects, chances are some of the symptoms you're having could be from that. Another cause is the environmental factors, the toxicity that is going on. Xenoestrogens, of course, found in plastics, in our pesticides, that's on our food, in our water supply, all kinds of different areas these are found. Heavy metals, other pollutants. I mean, you have I'm blanking on the name, but the various chemicals from the carpets and furniture we have in our house, which becomes airborne, and a lot of those can have this estrogenic quality or anti-androgenic quality. So there's all these different chemicals you got to be aware of. What I'm saying here is you need to keep your detoxification pathways working well, because your body can naturally get rid of this stuff to some degree. What happens is, if you're just overloaded and there's other problems going on, your body will just store it in your fat cells or store it in your endocrine glands and just keep it there. But you keep these detoxification pathways open, you open them up with different things, then your body can get this stuff out. The body is quite amazing at doing that. Some things that help support it are fasting. I do have a big chapter in my book, Powered by Nature, all about fasting. I think that's one of the easiest ways to do this. Of course, you want to build up smartly in doing that. Sauna of various types, sweating. The body is great at releasing both water and fat-soluble toxins through saunas. Clays, charcoals, zeolites, also shilajit in there. These different mineral or clay or earth-based compounds are great at adsorbing various toxins and pulling them from your body. So there's a whole lot you can do. If you just work to support that, then you're going to be getting rid of these things that can have these sexual health problems as well as much else. And we already talked about the hormones, but something I wanted to mention with hormone disruption is that, a couple things, is the thyroid hormone. We didn't mention that before, but thyroid hormone plays a role in every single cell in your body, and it can play a role in sexual health as well. Lack of thyroid, hypothyroid, is a big problem. Lots of people going around with that without being diagnosed with it, may not be aware that's a problem, especially women, but some guys as well. So looking at your hormones, blood testing can be a great way to do that, to get a snapshot of what's going on and see the different hormones that are going on. But one of the things with that is recognizing that there are vicious cycles that go on. So if your testosterone is down, it then becomes harder to do activities that would support your testosterone to raise it up. So you get trapped in this vicious cycle, and this often happens with other hormones as well. There are feedback loops in order to try to keep things balanced, but sometimes we get in these vicious cycles. The good news is you can also get into a virtuous cycle. When you have high testosterone, it's easier to do things that support that, but something to look at because this hormone disruption can cause these different problems. We mentioned the high blood sugar, diabetes, or metabolic syndrome, pre-diabetes, goes by different names. This is causing blood and nerve blood vessel and nerve damage, and it can be decades in the making, slowly chipping away at it. Type 1 diabetics, sorry, not necessarily the same case here, but type 2 diabetes, which is the vast majority of people, that is a lifestyle disease. It can be fixed. It can be reversed through diet and lifestyle change. It absolutely can. I'm not an expert on doing that myself, but look around. There are plenty of people doing it, and actually doing it in several different ways, which mostly involves getting off of the heavily processed high sugar food that we have in there. Now, if your diabetes has gone so far that you have had a leg amputated or have gone blind in an eye, then no, that part is not going to be reversed. But the earlier you are in this cycle, the more easily it can be done. So please do look that up. And if it's been going a long time, recognize if those vessels are damaged, there may only be so much that can be done, but still there often is something that can be done. I don't like to lose hope with anything. Another area is the prostate. Prostate issues are very prevalent. So we have BPH, benign prostatic hyperplasia, as well as prostate cancer. With the prostate, because that is located basically above your perineum, in that area, if it is growing, as happens in BPH or in cancer, it can physically put a kink in the blood vessels or the nerves that lead to the penis and having erections. So physically that can get in the way. In addition, these prostate issues tend to be related to hormone disruption. Of course, there are DHT signals on the prostate, and that's been looked at a lot, but a lot of newer science is showing just how much estrogen is an issue with the prostate. So definitely you can look into that. So a couple different issues with there. Next up, we have porn-induced ED, or PIDE, as it's sometimes called. This is something that I have suffered from. At this point in my life, I've now stopped watching porn completely. I don't have, it's not a moral judgment against porn. I don't have anything wrong with it. If it's done between, 2, 3, 500 consenting adults, not my problem. But I've found that it is wrong for me. And specifically, porn does not seem to be a problem if it's like a magazine or VHS. I'm sure there are some cases there, but it's the internet porn that is available these days, because when you're on a website, you can just click to next video, another video, you can go down a rabbit hole. And what's happening is that arousal seeking behavior that is tied into the dopamine pathways really starts to go awry, because you can keep getting a little bit more of a hit by switching things going on. So a lot of other people have had issues with this. I noticed that it was an issue for me that sometimes was causing this issue. It took me a while to get down to the bottom of it. In addition to just that whole dopamine pathway, it did seem to drive some disconnection in the relationship. So for me, I found that porn is just something that was not worth doing, and I was able to change that habit, and I don't look at it anymore, and things are much better since doing then. So it's something to be aware of. And this is why, I'm only 33. A lot of other younger guys are having erectile dysfunction because of this issue, as well as, our environmental toxicity and whatnot is also involved. So do be aware of that. Once again, not a problem for everyone, but definitely a problem for some. Number 9, having masculinity in challenge. Essentially, the little man doesn't work if the big man isn't doing well. This can be a wide range of things, specific relationship issues. If you don't feel like you're being a man in your life, then oftentimes that is tied into how you will perform in the bedroom. This can be a midlife crisis type of thing, career stress, all sorts of things where you don't feel like a man. It does not work the same. This is tied into our 10th category, beliefs, emotions, and others. There can be all kinds of other stuff here. So this is really just a catch-all category. But I mean, if you're super angry, are you wanting to have sex? I suppose that probably would get some people off, but for the most part, I don't think that works for most people. What about if you're super sad? Is that going to stand in the way? There's things like sexual abuse, physical or otherwise. There can be dogmatic beliefs about sexuality and what is okay and what is not. So you really want to come to understand your wiring. If this is an area that's important to you, you might have to dig through some shit to find out what is really going on. And of course, there are methods of doing that. So when I am looking to either solve a problem or just improve an area, I like to look at it not just in the physical plane. That's what most people are dominantly focused on in our materialistic viewpoint of the world. But not only just what's listed here, but I like to look at the physical, the nutritional, the energetic, the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual. I mean, we didn't get to, and what would be necessarily spiritual problems that are tied into this, but maybe that could tie into the masculinity and challenge or belief or whatnot. But these are important to look at these different levels, because even though it may seem it's just a physical problem, if you can't get hard, it could be a mental. The cause is on the mental plane, for instance. So that's why we look across these different levels and really try to address the different things. So with everything I've listed there, once again, complex, throwing a lot at you, see what stands out when I'm talking about it. If your ears perk up, then that's something to investigate a little bit further. So ED drugs, first, these do work. For the most part, their effective rate is 60 to 70%. How they're working, so most of them, there are some different ones, but the most common ones are classified as PDE5 inhibitors. PDE5, I'm not going to try to pronounce that chemical name, but this is essentially an enzyme that goes in and it breaks down the nitric oxide and the cyclic GMP, which are those chemicals that are essentially causing the erection in the first place and then keeping it there. If you have too much of this enzyme, PDE5, then it's breaking those down, erection goes away, or if there's too much in the first place, no erection in the first place. These drugs act as a PDE5 inhibitor, which means that they stop this enzyme, they get rid of it so that you get hard and you stay hard, and that tends to be how it works. These only work some of the time, so if you'd have, like, if your testosterone is in the toilet, then these may not be enough for you, or if there's any of these other causes, a lot of times it will not work, but they are effective. The thing is, they are just treating a symptom. It's working on that. It's not getting to the root cause at all, and they do have side effects, issues with the heart, blurry vision and eyes. So these basically, there are other enzymes, the PDE5, there's PDE1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, I believe. And so these other closely related ones that are at play in other organs also are affected by this. So you do want to be aware of those. And I personally have never taken one. Some people like to experiment with that. They know what it can work like with that, and that's kind of their goal they aim for. So it is up to you ultimately, but obviously I'd say, even if you do use that as kind of a crutch, something to use now as you work on trying to get to the causes and fixing that so you don't need them in the first place. We, of course, have the placebo effect, and I think those drugs probably work to that high degree. Obviously, they're effective. I'm not saying they're just placebos, but you can have something that is effective and a placebo effect on top of that. So because of the mass marketing and advertising and just prevalence of those drugs, I think they work better than they actually would by themselves. That marketing is increasing their placebo effect, essentially. I've done a lot of research on the subject. I'm fascinated by the fact that, like, placebo surgeries work, and there's all kinds of this other stuff. So even with the herbs, yeah, some people say it's a placebo effect, and I say that's great. You know, if you can actually just get the placebo effect, who cares what it takes to do that? Unless you're going broke doing it, if you can get that. But there can be a real effect and a placebo effect on top of it. So there's no one-size-fits-all solution. So going back to that elegant simplicity, I wish I could just recommend one thing, and I will recommend one thing to start with if you don't know where to go from all this. As far as a nutritional supplement, some of our herbs that you can try, I'll be recommending a bunch, but if you want just one basic starting thing, then you start with that, see if it works. If it doesn't, that's fine. Move on to some other stuff. If it does, great, then you can keep doing that. But there is no one-size-fits-all solution. Everyone is different. So what works for one person does not work for another. You saw we have all these causes, all these problems. What is causing the same problem, let's say erectile dysfunction in one person, could be caused by something completely different in another. Just the symptom shows up the same. Therefore, what fixes that symptom is going to be completely different. One thing I do want to mention, hopefully you've seen the emails about this, the erotic blueprint, and specifically if you go to lostempireherbs.com/EBP quiz, lostempireherbs.com/EBP quiz, EBP for erotic blueprint. It's a free quiz to take. And this woman who I very much admire, Jaya, she has basically, it's kind of like a personality type except applied to sex. And she's found that there are 5 different types. There's the energetic, the sensual, the sexual, the kinky, and the shapeshifter. The shapeshifter being grouping liking all of the 4. And this is very fascinating stuff. It's been hugely impactful for me because, well, truthfully, me and my wife were actually on different pages sexually. I am a sexual energetic. She is a sensual kinky. So we literally had different wiring for what really turned us on. Without going into a lot of details, I definitely recommend you check out that quiz. Of course, she does have paid programs and live events and coaching and all kinds of options available. And I've gone through that. This really does get my highest endorsement. And understand this, right? So in our culture, right, a man is supposed to be sexually wired. That's just kind of how we perceive things. Like, see a naked woman, get turned on, want to have sex, go like that. But not everyone is actually wired that way. And the kind of cultural overview of how a woman is supposed to be turned on is the bubble bath and the dim lighting and the candles and the sensual food, right? That sensual type. That is not how everyone is wired. So understanding that there are different ways to turn you on, and this does apply to your erections too. When you really tap into this stuff and understand it, then you may understand, why things weren't working. You really weren't getting turned on how you thought you should be, but that wasn't what it was right for you. So I do highly recommend you check this out. We're going to be moving into the herbs very shortly, but first, a weird cure from the present day. Lest you think we're so much more advanced today than that stuff, the hawk shit and the mercurial ointment and all the weird stuff they did in the past. I mean, to me, this is laughable. Inflatable penises. This is an actual surgery that you can go and do. And I don't know about you, I would never do this. I don't care if my penis was not working at all. I would not get this saline reservoir, this pump, and this balloon inserted into my cock. So this is what we're doing today as far as treating it. So I just wanted to put something recent to compare it to some of that weird stuff. Sure, this may get you erect, but at what cost? That's all I'm saying. I think, well, in general, just surgery, of which inserting an inflatable penis would be one type. I look at that as a last resort. Can be amazing, definitely works in certain circumstances, but this is not one that I would do. So we do have a special deal for you here. Thank you for watching this far into the webinar. We're coming up on an hour right now. If you go to lostempireherbs.com/sexual-health, lostempireherbs.com/sexual-health. On that page, you will find a special coupon. I believe we have 15% off for you for all the different herbs that I'll be talking about in this webinar, and we're covering a lot of them. So thank you for watching this webinar, whether live or recorded. You'll find that there, as well as details, and you can pick them all up along with that coupon. First up, we're talking about pine pollen. So pine pollen is, of course, great for hormonal support. It's one of our better testosterone boosters, are well known for that, especially in the tincture form over the powder. And this is because it contains phytoandrogens. One thing that just from, listening to customers and seeing test results, it appears to also help detox xenoestrogens. So it's not just about, there's really only trace amounts of testosterone in here. There's much more of these other things, and it does seem to be helping with the androgenic signal and getting rid of some of these xenoestrogens from the body, which may actually be a bigger benefit than just the testosterone boost itself. We have the megadose protocol with the morning wood guarantee. It definitely helps with erectile ability. So that morning wood guarantee, we kind of, in ourselves and also customers, notice this effect. And that's why I just kind of playful with it. If you do this protocol, it does seem to work for a lot of people. That could mean that the hormonal support or the detoxing of xenoestrogens is one of the angles there, because it helps with erectile ability, also seems to help with libido, with having more of that sexual baseline. If you think about it, the pollen from the pine trees, which is what this is the reproductive substance of the pine trees. This is essentially the equivalent of our sperm, right? It is all that nutrition, that the components, that life-giving material from the trees. So if we consume that, it helps us with our own pollen production, essentially. And the pollen in nature is spreading out, and it's not just pollinating pine trees, but because there's such massive amounts, you've probably, if you grow anywhere near, well, any trees, but pine trees, coats your vehicles and houses in this yellow dust, right? It gets everywhere, but that hormonal signal that it is giving is helping spring to spring up in those areas, because it's not just germinating the pine cones, but is also germinating everything that touches it, so you can consume this stuff and it works quite great. Personally, I feel like the pine pollen tincture is a bit too strong for me. It actually puts me in that kind of excess libido or horniness zone, which is appropriate sometimes, but other times it can be distracting. Tongkat Ali, another one of our big hormonal support testosterone boosters. It's called Ali's walking stick as kind of a euphemism for a cock. Really seems to help with the erectile ability, the libido. This story sounds kind of bad in our Me Too world, but I share it just to give a perspective. When I was first experimenting with Tongkat Ali, I was shopping at the store one day, and a woman walked by that was wearing yoga pants. She had a nice ass, and I just started following her a little bit for just like a few seconds. And then my like conscious mind kicked back in. I was like, whoa, what am I doing? Like my libido was very strong level to the point where, you know, it kind of took over a little bit there. Nothing bad happened. I'm just sharing that story. Once again, Tongkat Ali, I find that a little bit too powerful for me in most cases. So I don't take it regularly, but it's one of our most popular herbal supplements for those reasons. Then we have Sustanch. Sustanch is known as Sustanch in your pants, for obvious reasons. It's also called the stalk enlarger. I never liked the idea, you know, it just sounds so hokey, people talking about an herb being able to increase the size of their dick. But we do hear that from time to time from our customers. So it can happen. I'm not promising it at all. I never would promise that as an effect, because even if it did work, it's probably only working in a very small minority of people. But yeah, it has been reported with this and some of the other herbs that we're talking about. One of my favorites about this is that it was the favorite of Genghis Khan. And if you know the story, I mean, Genghis Khan probably raped a lot of women, had massive amounts of concubines. It's like 10% of the world is his descendants. And this was his favorite herb. So that tells you that he definitely had sexual prowess, you know, somewhat of an evil conquering guy, but had sexual prowess. According to Chinese medicine, it really directs blood flow to the genital area. Now, there's not a lot of science saying that it produces nitric oxide, but I would assume, I would guess, based on how it works and this strong ancient historic use, that it definitely is working in those ways. So promoting blood. It also seems to help with the hormones, possibly and specifically DHT. So even though this is one of our more expensive herbs, because it is a very high quality extract, it is, yeah, amazing stuff and very popular by itself. Next, we have horny goatweed. The name says it all. It's also known as epimedium, which is its Latin name. The story of how it got its name is very similar to the coffee story, if you know that. A farmer noticed his goats eating this plant one day, then his goats were having a whole bunch of sex after that. He goes to the same bush, he grabs some of the leaves, makes a tea out of it, gets very horny, has sex with his wife, and that's how horny goatweed got its name. So one of the cool things about this is it has icarin in it. That's its active constituent. And icarin is a PDE5 inhibitor, so it's working on this same mechanism by which some of the popular ED drugs work. Of course, it's not a drug, so it's not an isolated thing. Our horny goatweed only has, I think it's somewhere around 3% icarin. There are things out there that are like 95%, probably even 100% if you want to get there. Some people seek that out, but a a lot of our customers have great results with this. It's somewhere between 1 to 3% Icarin, because we believe in the synergy of all the different things that are in there. So this isn't even standardized. That's just what it comes out to. And with all the other things that it's doing, it seems to help really well. So a couple other effects. Horny goat weed is known to help with stress, with nerve regeneration, with blood pressure, and many other effects. Important to note that this herb specifically is because it is a strong yang herb, and it can be heating and drying, that it's not best to take long term. But taking it every once in a while when you need it, that can be really good. Horny goat weed, I think this is a good one for people to test if they can get an erection but it goes away because of that PDE5 inhibiting effect. This may be a good one to start with along those lines. Sustanch being great for if the blood flow seems to be an issue, pine pollen and tomcat specifically around the hormone. But recognize we're working with herbs, not drugs here, so we can't nail them down to one thing, although we may highlight one aspect of them. They're working on many different mechanisms. Next up, we have mucuna, which is a source of L-DOPA, the precursor to the neurotransmitter dopamine. So this seems to help with that whole arousal angle that I was talking about before. This may be helpful if you are coming off porn and have noticed you have porn-induced erectile dysfunction. Possibly this could help to kind of reset those pathways. I don't know. That's just a little bit of a guess. And once again, the dopamine in turn has effects on testosterone and much more. Mucuna tends to be like a relaxing and supporting the nervous system. And specifically about the L-DOPA, it seems to inhibit prolactin. I mentioned prolactin, didn't go into a lot of detail. Prolactin, so it was first identified as supporting lactation, a very important hormone for nursing mothers. However, us men have it too, and it's used at a whole bunch of other things. So prolactin spikes up after orgasm. It seems to be related to that refractory period. So if you're working with playing that with shortening that period, being able to have sex back to back, then mucuna would be one you may want to play with on that. Next up, we have Shilajit. Now, this is known as Indian Viagra, but it's important to note that I talked to an Ayurvedic doctor about this. It's really cool how he described it. So it's not Viagra in the sense that it's going to work like that, not even close to it, but Shilajit is just going to help restore the health of the human body in so many different ways, so that because humans men should naturally be able to have erect penis and have sex and all that it's going to restore you to have that natural foundation so that you have that natural capability. So that is kind of how it works. It's known as the destroyer of weakness, the conqueror of mountains. Really cool stuff. Has all these trace minerals, and specifically it has the fulvic and humic acid, which help to detox the body, that can help remove heavy metals out there. It also seems to be a potentiator of what is taken with it. So that's really cool effect, that you take another herb along with Shilajit and it seems to deliver it to your cells better. It seems to make it a little stronger. So that's the reason it's in a few of our different formulas, but also by itself, it is amazing stuff. And of course, you have both the powder and the resin form available. Oh, and I want to say right now, I know some of these herbs were out of stock. I believe the Shilajit resin and the mucuna. I apologize for that. Some of our suppliers just haven't been able to keep up with us. And one of the reasons that happens is, we could just go to another supplier and grab some other Shilajit stuff, but it wouldn't necessarily be the same quality. So one of the drawbacks to our commitment to quality is we're not really willing to cut corners on that sort of thing and just pick up some other stuff just to have stuff in stock, which is what some bigger companies might do. So unfortunately, while we are trying to get much better about keeping things in stock, that is a problem we're having right now. Hopefully we'll have all this stuff back in stock soon. Everything else I'm going to talk about a little bit quicker. Cordyceps, it is known as both a yin and a yang jing tonic. So it's a really good base, and it may specifically help around the endurance and the stamina specifically because it is known for that. The ant extract. First of all, it was reputed to be a great source of zinc. Some people said that, and then other people parroted, so we just kind of believed it. But we tested our ant. We tested a whole bunch of other people's ant. None of them came super high back in zinc. It has some, absolutely, but it's not like a really kind of supplemental dose of that. So I don't know why those other people are lying, but our testing did not bear that out. Besides that, it is one of the best like energy tonics. It has been used for sexual function for a really long time. We're not sure why it works. We also tested it for B vitamins. Wasn't particularly high in those either, but there's something in there that is just amazing. A lot of people that take it feel energy, like usable energy right away. And yeah, it's definitely been known as a sexual tonic for a long time. One thing I want to address with that is some other companies that sell these products, the FDA has cracked down on like ant extract specifically, because a lot of other companies that are selling them, it's not actually ant, or it's ant that is cut with analogs of sildenafil, which is the generic name of Viagra, and those all different analogs. There's different drugs of that kind. So they sell you an herb, but it's actually a drug. We tested our ant. We've tested several of our other products, the cistains, the pine pollen. Like none of that stuff is in there. We are delivering real herbs to you. Maca, I mean, this one's well known as a libido booster and tends to help with energy. Contrary to popular belief, the studies do not support this actually directly helping testosterone. So a lot of people will parrot that, but according to studies, not so good at that. One of the cool things about this one, unlike I think everything I've talked about, this one tastes good. I will be pointing that out on a couple of things, because that is something with many of these herbs. They're less than the best tasting ever. We have raw and gelatinized. Just one is gelatinized, means cooked essentially. I personally find I like that one a little bit better, but many people like the raw form. Hoshu Wu, this is one of the top yin jing tonics. So talking about supporting that foundation, this is doing so much in the background, really helping support the liver and the detox, the huge role that the liver plays. So Hoshu Wu is one of my favorite herbs. This is one that I do take regularly. I put some in my coffee. Amazing, amazing stuff. Somewhat similar to that is the Rehmannia. It's another one of those top yin jing tonics. This has a bit more of the focus on the kidneys, and that's the kidney itself, but also the kidney meridian, as in Chinese medicine. One way to think of the kidney stores the essence of jing, while the liver stores the blood. Both the jing, or the essence, and the blood, very important for sexual function. So these are ones that can be great. While you won't feel or have kind of out there more noticeable effects with Rehmannia or Hoshu Wu, most people won't notice as much effects. It really is doing things in the background, that yin restorative component that is absolutely crucial. We have Schizandra here, so a berry. This one does so much in the body. It has all 3 treasures, all 12 meridians. The reason I'm bringing this up here is that it's very astringent. If you've tasted this one, although it has those 5 flavors, many of them are subtle and in the background. The primary taste is sour and astringent. Now, astringent is that kind of like mouth puckering, drying out feeling that goes with it. Well, understand that with that taste, it's also kind of doing that in the body, and they say that it helps lock the jing into place. So Schizandra may be helpful in cases of premature ejaculation, nocturnal emissions, and excessive sexual activity, because it's going to help to keep that jing energy in the body even while things are going outside, or stop them from happening possibly. I haven't heard too many people, too many of our customers specifically using that for such, but that is an important component to understand. And really, this stuff is amazing, does so many things across the body, helping with the liver detox as well. Next up, we have ashwagandha. It does a whole lot of stuff. This herb seems to work well for the vast majority of people that take it. One of the main things is lowering cortisol. And cortisol, we kind of brushed past that one, but cortisol is known as the stress hormone. Cortisol, a lot of people do have very high levels, but cortisol by itself is not the bad guy. Cortisol is actually like anti-inflammatory. It's trying to clean up the damage that is being done in the body. While we do want to lower cortisol, we want to do that by lowering the stress in the first place. So ashwagandha is great at helping that relaxation, but without being sedating generally. Some people do find it a bit sedating, especially if they take like 3 droppers full, but it's definitely helping on that stress function, but it also seems to really help with testosterone, even helps with the thyroid hormones. I like to think of this as a yin-yang tonic as well, probably with some yang action too. But nettle root is another one of the yin-yang tonics, helps support the testosterone and the other hormones from the background, really well known for helping to support the prostate. So if you have any issues with that, I would absolutely give nettle root a try. I would say try both the different forms, our powder extract and the tincture. Unfortunately, there's not enough science to really say one is better than the other. I think you're going to get a little bit different effects with both of them. So if you do have those issues, I would say, just try them both and go from there. Blue vervain, this one works a little bit differently than everywhere else. This is one of the best stress relief herbs. It is a bitter nervine. What that means is that it has extremely bitter taste. Actually, just recently gave some to a person who almost vomited off of it, so hopefully that won't happen to you. That's the first time I'd seen that reaction, but otherwise it is extremely bitter. But that's actually its effect. By having that bitter taste on the tongue, it is kind of like cooling, draining the nervous system energy. So it's used for like type A personalities and entrepreneurs. It can be great, but specifically in the sexual realm, it's great for performance anxiety or being trapped in your head, because it has this downward pulling energy that can help to get you into your body, get you into your cock, and relax your nerves and allow that hormones and blood flow and everything else that is good. But if you really find yourself being trapped in your head or stressed out, this can be a great one to try for that. Next up, goji. There's a reputation of helping support growth hormone, which is kind of like a twin brother of testosterone. I've looked for the primary research on that, haven't really found it. But one thing is that it is high in arginine, the amino acid, which is a precursor to nitric oxide. This one also tastes good, so I like to point that out, because mixing some of the bad tasting herbs with the ones that taste good makes it more palatable, makes it easier to go down. And in general, because we're not, just using sugar or corn syrup or anything like that, these herbs have other good effects. So they actually work well with the herbs that don't taste so good if you're pointing them in this direction. Beet, another good tasting herb, well known for helping with blood flow and nitric oxide. So this works really well along those lines. Now I'm going to our formulas. So I mentioned all these herbs: Tongkat Ali, Sistanche, horny goatweed, mucuna, and shilajit. And specifically, this was formulated along lines like Tongkat Ali is especially great at the hormonal component. Sistanche is especially great at the blood flow component. Horny goatweed has that PDE5 inhibition, so it helps to support that blood flow, keeping that there. Mucuna is working on that dopamine arousal angle. Shilajit is potentiating everything and delivers trace minerals and everything in there as well. So we bring these 5 herbs together, and it's going to have a stronger synergy than any one of them by itself. So I was saying earlier, I'd make one recommendation. If you haven't tried any of these herbs and you really want to enhance your sexual potency or try to get it back to baseline or that ideal level, this is where I would start, with Thor's hammer. Now, one note: it tastes extremely bad. I personally think this is our worst tasting thing. You have like the bitterness from the Tongkat Ali mixed with saltiness of the other herbs, and you got to take a dose. A lot of people take around a teaspoon. You can take up to a tablespoon, but that tends to be too much for a lot of people. So on that note, I'm extremely happy to say we finally have Thor's hammer in capsules. And this is actually a slightly different formula using some different Sistanche and mucuna. So it's a little bit more of a potent formula. Very happy to have this. Definitely, I would say try this out. If you don't want to deal with the powders, this is something that is now available for you. And a lot of people are picking it up. So hopefully we don't run out of this one too. A couple of our other formulas: Phoenix formula. I talked about all these herbs, so the pine pollen, the shilajit, the black ant, and the hoshu. This was meant as just like a basic health formula, and because sexual health is tied into that, you have all these different effects. A lot of people have great results with this one for that reason. Then Stag Swag, unfortunately, we ran out of our first stock. It was way too popular. This based around deer antler, also has a sustanch pine pollen in there, then some yin herbs helping to support it. Some people, we've gotten some feedback already, and people are absolutely loving it. So it's a strongly yang formula, but it's rounded out with those yin herbs. And we call it Stag Swag because it gives you swagger. So the list goes on and on. There's so many other herbs: ginseng, damiana, yohimbe, fenugreek, saffron, tribulus, nutmeg, safid muesli, bulbine natalensis, cacao, cayenne, cannabis, on and on it goes. We could be here forever talking about all these different herbs. I focused on the ones that I know well, and of course that we have available at Lost Empire Herbs. So I just want to reiterate to you, we have that special deal available for you. That's at lostempireherbs.com/sexual-health. And if you go to this link, you'll see all those herbs listed there. You can add them to your cart, but specifically there's a 15% off coupon. So make sure you enter that when you are checking out and pick up one or more of these herbs. If you want to keep it real simple, first place I'd start just Thor's Hammer. That has that blend of different herbs that hits on many of the different angles. See how that works for you. If it doesn't work, well, we have our 365-day money-back guarantee. You can use that to get your money back or exchange it. Try some of the other herbs as well. Of course, we have that in capsules now, so that is a great way to go. Then, based on everything that we talked about, and if you can really identify where your key issues are, then you may be able to find certain herbs that help support you even more. So for instance, maybe Thor's Hammer works great, but you really know it's around like the blood flow issue. So supporting it, taking it along with the beet juice powder, for instance, could be a way of working. If you have erections, but then they go away, then like I said earlier, maybe just starting with the horny goatweed, seeing how that one works for you. I don't know if we put it on that page, but the coupon should work for it as well, was the Thor's Hammer customization pack. So that gives you one bag each of those herbs so you can play with them individually and really find what works for you. And feel free to come up with your own formulas as well. So now, Alyssa, if you are ready, we are going to go into questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Logan. And just a comment, we do have the Thor's Hammer customization package on that landing page. If they go ahead and scroll all the way to the bottom, there'll be a few bundles down there, which they will be able to save a little bit more by buying a bundle and also using the coupon code.
Nice.
All right. And we had about 5 or 6 questions come in. So are you ready to start answering those?
Yep, let's go for it.
All right. So the first question was, what herbs do you recommend that help with premature ejaculation?
So yeah, my first bet there, I would work with the Schisandra to do that, because it has to do with that locking the jing in place. So that doesn't mean that you're not going to orgasm at all, but jing is also about that like foundational strength, that constitution. So by kind of building that up, you should be able to help with this. Of course, without knowing more details, there could be some psychological issues there, or beliefs. There could be ways of working with that, but just working from the herbs, I'd start with the Schisandra. But looking at some of the other jing herbs, Hoshu Wu comes to mind as being a good one. You'd actually want more of the yin side of things, because yang is more of that excitement. So doing sustanch or goatweed may not be the best option in this case, but the Hoshu Wu, the Romania, the nettle root, those could possibly be some good ones. The ashwagandha, ashwagandha would probably fit in there well. Blue vervain comes to mind because premature ejaculation can often be part of like performance anxiety, can be an angle in there too, where you're worried if that's going to happen. So being able to relieve the stress of that may be a good option. So try them out, see what works for you, report back. I'd love to hear on that.
Nice. Next up is beetroot powder, and is this a good source for nitric oxide?
Yes. So it's interesting looking at some of the studies in the beetroot, and they're saying that there's not enough of the nitrates in there that will be transformed into the nitric oxide. However, I think this is looking at it at too much of a reductionist lens. Like, there's not enough testosterone in pine pollen for it to do anything. Yet, obviously, it is doing something along those lines. So these natural substances tend not to have the same amounts as what we would isolate in order to get this. There are other things you could take, like I mentioned, the arginine. People will take arginine powder or ornithine, some of the other amino acids, which act as precursors to nitric oxide. So you can absolutely play with these, maybe combine them with the beetroot. That might work even better if you want to do that. But even though there may not be enough nitrates in beetroot to really affect this, so some people say, I think because it has some stuff in there and we don't know the 100 other chemicals that are present in that beetroot because we haven't really looked at all that. We don't know the synergistic action of what's going on. So absolutely beetroot. And some of the studies are positive, showing that it's helping with athletic function. I don't know if I've seen any that look specifically at sex, but once again, athletic function and sex are not all that different when it comes to some of these components.
Very true. Wonderful. And the next one is kind of two parts in this question, but I'll just ask it all together. What can you do about poor blood flow and varicose veins?
Okay, so the blood flow, we're talking about that. Sustanch is well known to help with that. If we're talking about blood flow directly to the genitals, then Sustanch is known for that. The beetroot, which we are just talking about, that's going to help with the whole blood system. So yeah, it has this nitric oxide component, but one of the things that is often looked at with herbs is what's known as the doctrine of signatures. So beets, they have this deep red color. They kind of look like blood. Therefore, it helps the blood. Yeah, this, doctrine of signatures can be like too simplified in some cases, but often it really does seem to work out quite well. So the blood is going to be helped and supported by the beets. If you're looking at just blood flow in general, yeah, looking at the pressure of it, which is going to come down to diet a lot, is important. Now, varicose veins, some of the herbs, we don't sell these at all, but are well known to help with those, are really astringent herbs. And I mentioned that with Schizandra, so that might help a little bit, but some of the most well-known ones for helping with varicose veins, and these can be taken internally as well as with lotions and creams applied topically, would be witch hazel and horse chestnut. Those are like the big two for that area. Those also be used for stuff like hemorrhoids, which is the same sort of thing, a leaky vein or prolapsed tissue.
Nice. And can taking too many supplements be harmful for the liver?
Yes, I would say there's a point of excess with everything. So the liver ultimately is basically processing everything that enters into your body. Very few things do not go through the liver. So from digestion, you then have the portal vein going from the small intestine straight to the liver. Basically, all these nutrients are being shuttled there to be processed and then transported around the body or detox, depending on what the case is. So you can overdo everything. Like, you can overdo water, right? Drink too much water, it will kill you in doing that. So can you do too much herbs that's going to hurt the body? Absolutely. What that point is kind of hard to say. And it is going to vary from individual to individual. If you have a young person or someone who has their liver that is highly functioning, it can process a whole lot of herbs. If you have someone that is older, has, maybe they have cirrhosis or they've drinking all their life, or just have a whole bunch of toxicity, so that liver is backed up and overburdened, then there could be the potential that even a little bit of herbs, that person can't really properly handle them because their system is so overburdened, overloaded. So there might be some other ways you'd want to support them. So with that being said, yeah, can't really say how much is too much. That's why you have to experiment and see what works for you, and then go from there.
Thank you. And last but not least, which herbs will help with neuropathy?
That's a good question. Neuropathy. I have not specifically dug into that area. I would investigate lion's mane mushroom, which is not one we addressed today. That helps support nerve growth factor. So I imagine, and I believe that's looked at more in the brain, but that may be a factor in neuropathy as well. The mucuna, besides the L-DOPA, it does help support the nervous system in different ways. You could also look at bacopa. But yeah, that's something I'm going to have to dig into a bit deeper to find out for myself. So yeah, there'll probably be an article forthcoming on Lost Empire herbs. So that's a good subject.
Very good. And that's all we have question-wise.
Okay. So just want to reiterate, pick up these herbs, 15% off right now for watching the webinar here, lostempireherbs.com/sexual-health. If you have further questions, we'd also love to hear your feedback on this webinar. So write us in at info@lostempireherbs.com or give us a call, and our helpful people will be there for you. But yeah, I guess that's a wrap. Thank you, Alyssa.
Thank you.